Welcome back to the AC Pulse, where we archive the art, expose the systems, and uplift the creatives who keep culture alive. Today's episode features someone who has been with us for a while. Miss Sinn. You may know her as Carly Sinn, the burlesque baddie, performance powerhouse, and truth-telling artist who lit up our very first HERstory stage back in 2023. This one's more than an interview. It's a love letter to the artists who show up, speak truth, and leave glitter trails on the path to liberation. It's also a reminder that Avante Garde is not just a name, it's a movement, and this podcast is one of its many, many unapologetic forms. So let's get into it. Before we dive in, let's talk about who's sitting with us today. Miss Sinn is not just a performer. She's a multidisciplinary artist, poet, dancer, hospice chaplain, and spiritual caregiver who has spent over 3 decades, 10, 20, 30 years, mastering movement and storytelling through the body. With a BA in contemplative neuroscience and somatic psychology, and now finishing her Master of Divinity at Naropa University, Carly's art is a portal, not survivor, warrior of domestic and sexual violence. She turned to stripping to rebuild her life, and now channels her lived experience into spiritual caregiving for other, not survivors, warriors, those who have endured, persevered, and overcame some of life's biggest testimonials. She is softness and power, grief and glitter, ministry and movement. She's been a part of Avante Garde since HERstory 2023, and she continues to this day to embody what it means to tell truth through the body, reclaim space through art, and live the revolution out loud. So settle in, because Miss Sinn is about to take us there. Can you tell us when you realized your work is art?
Hey. I guess the moment I was born. I guess that's a hard question to answer because I do think it's important to identify as an artist. I also feel like we are all artists. Maybe we're just not given the permission to be that, or we're not given the permission to express. But I do think we're all artists. So
I love that. I totally agree. At what point did you realize that your art had something powerful to say?
That's also hard because it's like sometimes I struggle with like, who am I to think that I have anything to say? But I think I'm trying to like own that a little more, just because women's stories are so marginalized, and they're just like not what we hear often. Like, we just hear men's stories, we hear about the hero journey all the time, and like all that stuff, and there's just this whole other part of the equation that's the feminine story, the woman's story, that we don't hear about. And I want to be a part of lifting that up, and I want to be a part of that wave that's starting to happen. So
what is, or do you find, the most rewarding part of being an artist?
ooh, probably just the freedom, like the finding the space to just expand, make my own rules with it, just the ability to express. And there really is kind of no limit to that. It doesn't have to be sterile. It doesn't have to fit into any sort of prescribed thing. Like there really is just so much space and so much room to play and bring your whole self into the equation. And like nothing really needs to be hidden in the space of art. So that's the most rewarding, is the freedom of it.
This episode is brought to you by Avante Garde. But let's get one thing clear. Avante Garde isn't a person. It's not just a brand, and it's definitely not just another arts nonprofit. Avante Garde is a creative ecosystem, a platform, a movement built by artists for artists, especially the ones who've been left out, underestimated, or told they had to shrink to fit in. Avante Garde is where not survivors, warriors turn their stories into stage shows, where healing looks like paint, poetry, policy, and performance, where we don't just make space, we build it from scratch. We put our community at the center and let the art speak for itself. From artist residencies and memberships to programs like HERstory and Sustainable Couture, Avante Garde is designing a future where art is liberation, not luxury. So if you've ever felt like the system wasn't made with you in mind, that is exactly why we made this. This is Avante Garde. Shout out to the madam, the beat slaying, sound sorceress behind today's episode. If the vibes are vibing, and you know they are, you know who did it. Produced and composed by the madam. Always capital, always iconic. Now back to the show. What would you say is the hardest part about being an artist?
I think there's all this freedom, but then there's also a lot of constraint in the spaces that it gets to exist. Like there's just not a lot of spaces for it. There's not a lot of value placed on it. It really comes down to access to resources and the access to space. And because of the society that we live in, unfortunately, a lot of the people that have access to the space and to the resources are in some sort of position of privilege. And that usually means they're a man with money. And fortunately, this puts a lot of female artists in a pretty precarious situation of having to pander to these men with money to just have space to be able to show stuff in a gallery setting, to be able to perform in a gallery setting. And I've run into situations where I've had to like minimize myself in some way, or just like pander to someone else's vision just so I could have like a little bit of space. So I guess my hope is that there's going to be more opportunity for women to just take up more space on our own terms and not necessarily have to answer to someone in a position of privilege, but can just like do it on our own. Yeah.
How do you find your identity, your gender to drive your work?
I mean, definitely as a woman, that's a huge, I mean, that most of my art like focuses on that experience. And, you know, I feel like in this moment of this question, I would be remiss to not talk about being a white woman making art, and also feeling like that also comes with its own privileges as well, and wanting to see more just inclusion and diversity of marginalized voices in the arts being lifted up. Because even that, like, I have certain access that women of color do not. And so I want to see, yes, like I want to share my story, but I want to be a part of helping to lift up and like bring into the fold more of the voices that have been excluded for so long. So if that means me taking a step back to make more room for other people to come in, ideally it's like all of us could rise together, but there also needs to be a moment where sometimes there's a little bit of like a step back, so more voices can come in that have been left behind for too long.
That was Miss Sinn, y'all, a walking masterclass in reinvention, resilience, and radical art making. Huge love to her for always showing up with the fire, the softness in equal measure. And to Avante Garde, the creative justice engine behind this podcast, we don't just spotlight artists, we build stages, throw the mic, and make sure the lights are on. For real. And for those watching from the sidelines, confused about what we do or why we're still here, any continued attempt to intimidate or misrepresent this situation will be included in the court record and reported accordingly. Because we're not just documenting the culture, we're defending it. Part 2 with Miss Sinn drops next Thursday. You know where to find me. Art is the archive, community is the legacy. This is the AC Pulse. For the ancestors, the artists, and the ones they tried to silence. Stay building, stay empowered, and stay rising.